Anatoly Karpov versus Garry Kasparov in the 31st World Championship match held in 1984. This is game 27 and let's see how it turned out. After a series of 17 draws, it seemed that Kasparov had finally found the weakness in Karpov's play and was able to halt the reigning champion. But alas, his hope seemed to diminish after Karpov's 5-0 lead against the challenger after this astonishing game. The game started off with knight f3 d5, d4 knight f6, c4 e6, knight d3, bishop e7, bishop g5, h6, and now an interesting decision, bishop takes f6. Karpov's wanting to trade his bishop and give black the bishop pair. Bishop h4 was the more widely known move, where after castle, e3, b6, tens of thousands of games have been played from this position onwards. But after h6, Karpov decided bishop takes f6, and Kasparov responded with bishop takes f6, e3, castle, queen c2, c5, d takes c4, and d takes c5, my bad. And a little earlier, 5 months back in July 1984, in the matches between USSR or Soviet Union and the rest of the world, in this position, Timon against Kasparov played queen to a5. And he got into a rather difficult position after c takes d5, e takes d5, long castle, bishop e6, king b1, rook takes g5, rook c8, knight takes g5. Rook takes c5 is not possible now because of b4, rook takes c2, knight f6, gf6, and simply b takes a5. Where after rook takes f2, it may seem that the position is equal because of the materials, yet something like rook d8 check is possible. There is double pawns for black and an isolated pawn on h6. And though you may counter that white has double pawns on the a file, black's rook and knight are not doing anything and will not be able to come out easily. That's why Garry stuck with a theoretical option with d takes c4. Bishop takes c4, queen a5, castle, and here queen takes c5 is not the best move here because of knight e4. Queen e7, knight f6, queen takes f6, and rook fd1. And white gets a significant lead in development. The other rook is coming to c1, it's going to attack some pieces on c8, and it's going to attack some weaknesses as well. And slowly white will be able to build up his advantage. That's why bishop takes c3 was played, queen takes c3, and simply queen takes c3. B takes c3, and white does have double pawns on the queen side. Knight d7, and now c6. A typical idea, the c5 pawn was bound to be lost. Knight was coming to c5 and there was no way to defend it. So by playing this, white just simply weakens black's queen side and his pawn structure. B takes c6. And my first question to you, white to play and how should he continue? Pause the video if you need to. Rook a b1. The world championship at that time thought for 21 minutes, twice as long as his preceding moves. And the point behind this is to prevent the development of this bishop. And the only way which he can come out is by knight b6. But the knight on b6 is not where he wanted to go. He would want to go to c5, where it comes to a4, and it can come to e4, and overall, and this square on c5 is way better than the square on b6. A crafty move by Karpov indeed. Bishop e2, and now c5. And another very interesting move, rook fc1. White prophylactically defends his c3 pawn because he knows that there will be possible attacks against the c3 pawn like knight a4 or knight d5. And he also just frees a path for his king to come out to the center. Another very smart move from the world champion. Here, knight e5 suggests itself, but after bishop b7, knight d7 would give black a nice move with bishop takes g2. King takes g2, Knight takes d7 where black does get a pawn. That's where rook fc1 was another idea. And here bishop b7. An inaccuracy compared to white's prophylactic move. Here it is important to play bishop to d7. This is to defend the invasion of the killer white rook, which will come to b5 and attack c5, go to a5, attack a7, and it will just create havoc. This would have been the clear better option, but bishop b7 was opted. King f1, bishop d5, and now rook b5. And as suspected, Karpov brings his rook to b5. Here, of course, Kasparov cannot take on a2 because of c4, and the bishop on a2 is menacingly trapped by the white, as it cannot come out anyhow because of this white rook and this white rook on b5. Next move, rook b5, and the bishop's gone. Another smart idea why rook fc1 was such a crafty move. Knight d7, rook to a5, rook fb8, and now c4. Bishop c6, and knight e1. And now the main point of white's weird maneuvering is shown. The knight wants to hop to c5, in d3 and c5, and attack c5, and how is black going to defend that? And here rook to b4 was tried. So your move, can you find the phenomenal move which was played by Karpov in the game? Pause the video if you need to. Bishop d1, just stopping rook to a4. It was this move that underestimated Kasparov. And I don't think Kasparov saw this bishop d1 idea, or else he would never have played rook to b4. A simpler idea would have been rook to c8, trying to defend the c5, and after knight d3, you can even play rook b8. Knight takes c5 is of course not possible because of take, and bishop takes g2. But rook b4, trying for counterplay. Bishop d1. Here if knight d3, Kasparov's idea was to play rook to a4. And now white has to exchange the rooks, and now the c5 pawn cannot be attacked anyhow. Something like rook b1, black can just occupy the b8 as well for himself. Or he can simply play e5. And it's not going anywhere for white. Therefore, bishop d1, just stopping any ideas of black. Rook to b7, f3. Rook d8, knight d3, attacking c5, g5, and again a very nice move, bishop to b3. Not just simply knight takes c5, as I think Karpov saw. Knight takes c5, rook takes c5. Black has a stunner, rook to b2. Sacrificing the bishop. If he takes rook d2, and it's perpetual draw. Anything which you play, rook c8 check, okay, never mind, king g7. And how are you going to defend the draw? Bishop moves somewhere, never mind, check, check. And the checks are just keep on coming. No way to stop them. So bishop b3, stopping any ideas of rook b2. King f8, and finally knight takes c5. Knight takes c5, rook takes c5, and white has won the pawn. And now all he has to do is to convert the game. And that seemed like a hard process. Rook d6, king e2, bringing the king into the center. King e7, rook d1, trading the good rook right now because it's occupying the central files. Rook takes d1, king takes d1, king d6, rook to a5. Attacking a7 so that the black rook on b7 is stuck here. f5, king e2, h5 and e5. When black is trying to go in the flank and attack on the flank, white immediately begins an attack on the king side pawn from the center. F takes e4, f takes e4. If bishop takes e4, well now rook takes g5. Happened in the game. And bishop f5. And please note here, do not take the pawn on h5 for bishop g4 check, and this rook is gone. And Karpov rightly didn't and played king to e3. h4, king to d4, e5 check, king to c3. Bishop b1 attacking a2, simply a3. Rook e7, rook g4, and h3. A very nice move from Kasparov here. The attempt by black to carry out his plan with e4 and push the pawn ahead encounters a refutation after simply bishop d1. Rook f7, king d4, rook f2, c5, king e7, bishop b3 again. Something like rook d2 check, king c3, rook d3, king d2, e3, and bishop e4, a4, my bad. This black bishop on b1 is attacked, rook d1 is not possible to save it, and there is literally nothing for black. So that's why h3 first. Now, if you play g takes h3, black has the idea of playing bishop to f5. Rook to g3, trying to defend the h3 pawn, simply rook h7. And how are you gonna support the h3 pawn? Something like bishop d1, take, and this is a drawn bishop endgame. With just one pawn up, it's gonna be very hard for white to convert. So g3. White rightfully doesn't take the pawn on h3. Rook e8 and king g7. Rook e8, the plan was to just bring the rook to the f file, because rook f7 straight away encounters a problem. c5 check. King takes e5, bishop takes f7, game over. So rook e8, rook g7, rook f8. Black wants to play rook f3 check or rook f2 and come to h2. Rook takes a7, rook f2. King b4, rook takes h2. And this position is now winning for white. But this position was drawn. So it's your move again. In this endgame, how should black proceed? And how should he draw the game? There is only one way to draw. Black to play, I would recommend you pause the video now. Here, rook b2 was the only chance of draw for black. Why? Because after c5 check, king c6, rook a6 check, king c7, king c4, bishop c2. And this rook endgame is drawn somehow. After king d5, rook takes h2 now, rook a7, king b8, rook h7, rook h1. King e4 trying to bring the king back, h2, king f3, king c8, king g2, rook c1, king takes h2 and rook takes c5. And this looks drawn because white has two very scattered pawns and one of the pawns will be lost by force. Something like rook to a7 trying to defend it. Well, the king is on b8 and this will defend the a3 pawn. The rook will try to defend the g pawn and this black pawn will try to go forward trying to divert white. So rook b2 trying to pin the bishop was the only chance of draw. But here Kasparov missed it and played rook takes h2. And suddenly this game was won for white. Let's see how. c5, king c6, bishop a4 check. King d5, rook d7 check. King e4, c6. And now, okay, rook b2 check was played in the game. If rook h1, c7 simply. Rook c1, rook d1, winning the black bishop at least, because you can never take because of c8 queen. But an even better option than c7 would have been simply bishop c2 check. Very nice move. Bishop takes c2 and now only c7. And now the black rook cannot come to c1 because this bishop on c2 is blocking it. So black tried rook b2 check, king to a5, and this is important move. The position of the white king on the c file would have given black additional possibilities of checks. But now the game is decided. Rook to b8, c7. Rook to c8, king b6. King e3, bishop c6, just stopping any ideas of promotion. h2, g4. Rook h8, rook d1. Bishop a2, rook e1 check. King f4. Rook e4 check. King g3, rook takes e5, king takes g4, and rook e2. And here Kasparov put forth his hand, and thus Karpov got the 5-point and lead, and he needed only 1 point, for which he had to struggle for the next 21 games. That's how close the World Championship was of 1984. That's it for me. See you next time. Bye.